In 208 BCE, a Chinese prime minister named Li Si was dragged into a town square. They tattooed his face, sliced off his nose, chopped off both his feet, and then, while he was still alive and screaming, they cut him clean in half at the waist. All of that was completely legal. For over 3,000 years, Imperial China turned human suffering into an exact science. These are the 20 worst torture methods they ever used, and number one is the reason grown men begged for a quick death they were never going to get. Let's start with number 20. Beaten until the bones show. Every town in Imperial China had a building called a yamen. That was where the local magistrate handed out punishment. And the most common punishment was a bamboo cane, about as thick as a grown man's thumb, slammed across the bare buttocks over and over again. The Qing dynasty allowed up to 100 strikes with the heavy stick. After 40 hits, the skin split wide open. Infection set in within days. A full 100-strike sentence was basically a death warrant. The Yuan dynasty made it official with 2 levels. Light stick meant 7 to 57 strikes. A heavy stick meant 67 to 107. Most prisoners who got the heavy version never walked out of that courtyard. And there was no defense lawyer, no jury, and no appeal. The magistrate pointed at you, and that was your fate. When Jesuit missionaries arrived in Beijing during the early 1600s, they were shocked at how low the crime rate was compared to Europe. Now you know the reason. But bamboo beatings? That was the gentle stuff. What the Chinese did to publicly shame a person was a whole different kind of cruelty. Here comes number 19. The wooden prison around your neck. Imagine a massive wooden board weighing over 200 pounds locked around your neck. So wide you cannot reach your own mouth. So heavy you cannot lie down to sleep. That was the Kang. A placard listing every crime you committed was nailed directly onto the wood for the whole city to read. Guards dragged you to the busiest gate in town every morning so crowds could stare and spit at you. Some prisoners wore this thing for 6 straight months. The Northern Qi dynasty started using it around 550 CE, and it stayed in use for more than 1,300 years through the end of the Qing. You could not eat unless a stranger fed you by hand. Many collapsed from exhaustion, and the weight slowly crushed their neck and spine. And the government considered this a minor punishment. What comes next is where the real pain starts, and it only gets worse from here. Let's move to number 18. Crushing your fingers one by one. The Ming dynasty had a secret police force called the Embroidered Uniform Guard. They answered directly to the emperor, and they had a favorite toy for getting confessions. 5 small wooden sticks connected by a single rope. Your fingers went between the sticks. Then, someone pulled the rope tight from both ends, slowly and steadily. First, the knuckles cracked. Then the bones splintered. This device was called the zunji, and it was built specifically for interrogating women. Under Chinese law, a person could not be convicted without first confessing. So this little device existed for one reason: to force words out of your mouth. It did not matter if those words were true. The zunji was used from the Song dynasty all the way through 1911. Over 900 years of crushed fingers and forced confessions. Next one is number 17. Smashing your ankles to pieces. 3 wooden planks, each about a yard long, tied together with cords. Your ankles went between the planks, and the interrogator pulled the ropes from both sides, squeezing the wood tighter and tighter against your bones until they cracked apart. This was the jagun, completely legal, completely accepted across multiple dynasties. A Portuguese Jesuit priest named Alvaro Semedo described it firsthand after spending a full year inside a Chinese prison during the 1616 anti-Christian campaign. He watched the jagun break ankle after ankle. Prisoners confessed to murders they never committed and plots they never planned. Anything to stop the crushing. But the Chinese had devices that went after more than just your ankles. They went after your skull. Here comes number 16. Squeezing your skull until it cracks. A leather ring fitted around your head, a string attached to it, a bamboo frame holding the whole thing in place. During interrogation, the guards pulled the string tighter and tighter, compressing your entire skull. Ming Dynasty records call this the Naogu. It was first described during the Song Dynasty and was technically illegal through most of imperial history. But bans meant nothing behind closed doors. The pressure burst blood vessels in the eyes, caused blinding headaches, and in extreme cases cracked the skull itself. Officials kept using it for centuries because it worked. People confessed to anything when they felt their own head closing in. And that was still just the warm-up. The next one targets the most sensitive nerves in your entire body. Let's move to number 15. Bamboo hammered under the fingernails. During the early Tang Dynasty, an official named Wang Shu sharpened bamboo sticks to fine points and hammered them one by one under prisoners' fingernails. The nerve endings under your nails are among the most sensitive in the human body, and the pain was so extreme that nearly everyone blacked out. During the Han Dynasty, another official named Shui An used iron needles the same way during a corruption investigation in Yangzhou. He hammered needles under a clerk's fingernails and then forced the man to scrape hard soil from the ground with his bleeding hands. This was never about punishment. This was about breaking a person's mind completely. And it lasted over 1,000 years. Next one is number 14. Strangled by your own body weight. A tall, narrow wooden box with a hole cut at the top for your neck. Your head stuck out above the frame. Your hands and feet were chained inside. And beneath your feet sat a pile of stones. That pile was the only thing between you and death. Every single day, a guard removed 1 or 2 stones from the bottom. Your body sank lower. The frame pressed harder against your throat. And over days, sometimes weeks, you slowly strangled to death under your own weight. You were fully awake. You could see the crowd watching. You could hear them talking about when you would finally stop breathing. And there was nothing you could do except feel the air leaving your lungs, 1 stone at a time. We are only at number 14, and the real horrors have not even started yet. Here comes number 13. Burned and branded for life. Red-hot irons pressed directly onto bare skin. Red-hot coins placed on the body one at a time. Some interrogators wrapped fingers in oil-soaked paper and lit them on fire, creating what they called burning finger candles. During certain dynasties, prisoners were forced to hug a heated bronze pillar until their chest and arms blistered completely. Branding the face was so common that it became one of the original 5 legal punishments, going back to the Shang Dynasty, around the 11th century BCE. The character for this punishment, Mo, literally means ink, because the burn scars left permanent dark marks. Everyone who saw your face after that knew your crime without you ever saying a single word. Let's move to number 12. Your nose sliced off in public. A blade across your face. 0 anesthetic, 0 warning. 1 quick slice, and your nose was gone forever. This punishment was called Yi, and it was so routine in ancient China that the language created a special character just for it. The punishment went back over 3,000 years to the Shang Dynasty. Courts handed it out for assault and certain types of theft. The victim survived, but they carried the shame everywhere for the rest of their life. In Chinese culture, physical wholeness was directly connected to honor, family reputation, and your fate in the afterlife. A missing nose told the whole world your story before you ever opened your mouth. Your face became your criminal record. If you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button. We cover the darkest chapters of history every single week, and the methods coming up next are on a level that is hard to even process. Next one is number 11. Feet chopped off and kneecaps scraped away. The punishment was called yue, and it meant chopping off one or both feet with a single blow. In 1999, archaeologists digging in Shaanxi province found a female skeleton missing the right foot. Medical analysis confirmed she was a victim of yue, one of the oldest physically proven torture methods in Chinese history. But there was something even worse than losing your feet. Some prisoners had their kneecaps scraped completely off. That punishment was called bin. The most famous victim was Sun Bin, a military genius from the 4th century BCE. After both kneecaps were removed, he could never walk or ride a horse again. He spent the rest of his career commanding entire armies from a wooden cart. His very name was changed to permanently mark what they did to him. Here comes number 10. Everything below the belt gone forever. They called it palace punishment. The process was slow and methodical. A rope was tied tightly around the genitals to kill the tissue. Then a blade removed everything. Ash was packed into the wound, and a goose feather was pushed into the urinary passage to keep it from sealing shut. The most famous victim was Sima Qian, the father of Chinese historical writing. Around 94 BCE, Emperor Wu gave him a choice: die right now or lose your manhood and live. Sima Qian chose castration because he had not finished writing the Records of the Grand Historian, one of the most important books in all of Chinese history. He survived and completed his masterwork, but thousands of other men died from infection within weeks. Those who survived served as eunuchs in the palace, cut off from normal life forever. And this still does not crack the top 5. The ones ahead are so extreme, they are hard to even describe. Let's move to number 9. Flesh scraped off layer by layer. They called this punishment combing and washing. The name sounds gentle. The reality was pure nightmare. The prisoner was stripped naked and strapped to an iron bed. Boiling water was poured over the entire body, and then an iron brush, a tool that looked like a heavy wire scrubbing pad, was dragged across the skin, layer by layer. First, the outer skin peeled away, then deeper tissue, then muscle, then bone. Historical records credit Zhu Yuanzhang, the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, with creating this method during the 1300s. Prisoners who somehow survived the first session were sometimes dragged back for a second round. Nearly all of them died during the first. But even that is not the worst thing on this list, not by a long shot. Next one is number 8, cooked alive inside a giant pot. During the Tang dynasty, Empress Wu Zetian ruled China with an iron grip, and her most loyal enforcer was a man named Lai Junchen. He invented a method he called inviting the Lord into the cauldron. A massive metal pot was filled with water or oil. The prisoner went inside. Firewood was lit beneath it, and the temperature climbed slowly. As the liquid heated, the prisoner thrashed and screamed and begged to confess. If they talked, the fire might stop. If they refused, the temperature kept rising until they were cooked alive. Lai Junchen used this on hundreds of officials and political enemies during the late 600s CE. But eventually he fell out of favor with the empress, and the very government he had terrorized sentenced him to death. The man who cooked others alive finally got what was coming to him. Here comes number 7, forced to dance on a red-hot bronze pillar. This goes back over 3,000 years to the Shang dynasty. King Zhou, one of the most infamous tyrants in Chinese history, created a punishment called Pao Lao. A massive bronze cylinder, roughly 6 meters tall and over 2 meters around, was heated from below with charcoal until it glowed red. The condemned was forced to walk across the top. The surface was coated in grease to make it slippery. The heat was unbearable, and one wrong step meant falling into the burning coals below. Historical texts like the Junzi and the Book of Sui describe how King Zhou and his consort Daji sat and watched prisoners dance and scream before they slipped into the flames. They reportedly laughed while it happened. This punishment was used against ministers who dared to criticize the king. Speak up, and the bronze pillar was waiting. Let's move to number 6. Buried alive with only your head above ground. Used mostly during wartime, live burial was fast, cheap, and terrifying. Prisoners of war were often forced to dig their own graves. Then they were shoved in and covered with dirt while still breathing. In worse versions, the victim was buried standing up with only their head exposed above the surface. Then the torturers went to work on the face and skull, burning, cutting, or they just walked away and let the person die slowly from thirst and sun over the course of several days. This was used across multiple dynasties and countless wars. It was never part of official law. On the battlefield, the law simply did not exist. Next one is number 5. Skin peeled off like a butterfly opening its wings. A knife split the skin along the spine, starting low on the back, and peeled it away from the muscles underneath. Historical accounts describe the process looking like a butterfly opening its wings as the 2 flaps of skin separated from the body. For heavier prisoners, the fat layer made the job harder and the agony longer. An alternative method buried the victim to the neck, cut a cross on the scalp, and poured liquid mercury inside. The mercury seeped between skin and flesh, separating the entire skin in one piece. Whether the mercury version actually happened is debated, but the standard knife method is confirmed across multiple dynasties. Here comes number 4. Cut clean in half and still writing in blood. A massive blade came down and cut the prisoner in 2 at the torso. And death was not instant. Because your vital organs sit in the upper body, the condemned person stayed conscious for several agonizing minutes after being severed. The most famous case was during the Ming dynasty. Emperor Chenzhou sentenced a scholar named Feng Xiaoru to the waist chop for refusing to endorse his claim to the throne. After the blade fell, Feng used his elbows to drag himself across the ground. With his own blood, he wrote the Chinese character for usurp on the stones. He managed to write it 24.5 times before he finally died. And his entire extended family, all 873 members, were rounded up and executed after him. Let's move to number 3. Ripped apart by 5 horses running in 5 directions. This method was called cheli. The prisoner's head and all 4 limbs were tied to separate ropes attached to 5 different horses. On command, all 5 charged at full speed in opposite directions. The human body was ripped into 5 pieces. The most famous victim was Shang Yang, one of the greatest political reformers in Chinese history. He served the state of Qin during the 4th century BCE and built the strict legal system that made Qin the most feared kingdom in China. But after his enemies gained power, they used that very same system to destroy him. The horses sometimes had to charge multiple times before the limbs fully separated. The entire process was a public spectacle watched by thousands. Next one is number 2. Your entire bloodline erased from history. This was not one method of torture. This was a system of collective punishment so extreme it wiped entire families off the face of the earth. When someone was convicted of treason, the emperor could order the execution of 9 levels of their family: parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, siblings, in-laws, aunts, uncles. Every single one hunted down and killed, often by lynching or beheading. The worst recorded case happened in 1380 when Ming Emperor Hongwu charged an official named Hu Weiyong with treason. The purge killed over 30,000 people connected to one man. Women and children under 16 were sometimes spared from the blade, but seized as slaves. The family name was wiped from every record, as if they never existed. And there is only one method left, the one that sat at the very top of the Chinese legal system for almost 1,000 years. The punishment that destroyed the body, the soul, and any chance of peace in the afterlife. And the last is number 1, death by 1,000 cuts. The prisoner was tied to a wooden frame in a crowded public square. An executioner stepped forward with a knife, and one small cut at a time, flesh was sliced away from the living body. The number of cuts depended on the crime. Some received 100, others received over 3,000. The executioner was trained to keep the victim alive as long as humanly possible. First the chest, then the arms, then the legs. Piece by piece, the body was carved away while the crowd watched. In September 1630, General Yuan Chenghuan was subjected to Ling Qi at Ganxiqiao in Beijing. It took half a day for him to die. Ming historian Ji Liuqi recorded that local residents collected his body parts afterward because they wanted to eat his flesh. The last recorded case was in 1905. A Mongolian guard named Fu Zhuli was executed for killing a prince. French soldiers photographed the entire thing from start to finish. Those photographs became some of the most disturbing images in human history. In Chinese belief, your body was a sacred gift from your parents. Ling Qi did not just destroy the body, it destroyed the soul. A person cut to pieces could never be whole in the afterlife. The punishment followed you beyond death and into eternity. Emperor Guangxu officially banned Ling Qi in 1905, but for nearly 1,000 years before that, it was the single most feared sentence in the entire Chinese legal system. A punishment that went beyond the grave. For over 3,000 years,